Bonjour, hello. Who owns the circular economy? This is a question that I asked, explored together with colleagues that you see here above from Montreal, to better understand the interrelation of economic democracy and circular economy. And we do think that the context for the question is timely. On the one hand, already in 2019, IPBES published its global biodiversity assessment, with all major drivers pointing in the direction of unsustainability. At the same time, a bit later, during the COVID, the Democratizing Work Manifesto was published and received a lot of attention, calling to the need for rethinking workplace democracy as one important aspect of the crisis. And so there is here an important question to better understand regarding the interrelation of this economic democracy and sustainability challenge that is the call of the IPBES and others, that we need a transformation towards more sustainable economies. For this task in our study, we were specifically interested in exploring the arguments for the instrumental value of economic democracy for sustainability, which we explored based on Ferreras' work to start with. So there you find arguments such as workers care for the environment more so than capital does, shift to a service economy that's called for in a lot of the post-growth literature, requires workers having a say. It supports the call for more regional economies, and social economy as a socio-economic movement beyond individual organization establishes a social context beyond particular organization that puts people and planet before profit. So these are general philosophical arguments in the end, and we wanted to explore them via a specific context and Quebec and the intersection of circular economy and social economy there, which is based on the work of a bigger project of the TIES, which has created a sample of 26 social economy organizations and their relation to circular economy. You see here the four strategies of the Institut EDEC: rethinking products and reducing resource inputs, intensify use, sharing, and collaborative economy as the second one. Third one, how can we extend product life, maintenance, repair, and so forth. And fourth, perhaps the most familiar one, recycling and the resource reuse and revalorization of so-called waste. So the TIES explored here 26 organizations in relation to these circular economy strategies, and we added to that an exploration in fall 2020 of what is the link between these organizations and the economic democracy and social economy interlinkage. The sample consists of 20 nonprofits, 5 cooperatives, and 1 private enterprise, 1 person individual. The number of employees varies from 200 to 1, but on average 30 employees, just to give you a rough idea. And what I can do here is just give you an impression of our exploration via the first 2 arguments. So the first one was workers care for the environment. While capital is mobile, labor is less so, and this structurally yields greater concern for the environment as home. This idea is supported by our sample by regionally recruited staff, and for all but 2 organizations, a customer base in the region. Moreover, the 19 not-for-profits have a legally mandated constraint on profits. For the co-ops, we find objectives such as reinvest profit into the cooperative or into the municipality. These constraints support the idea of a structural constraint on environmental exploitation due to profit maximization. Specifically for co-ops, there is the additional point that they cannot be sold. The members only can take out their individual parts. The decision-making process in not-for-profits is formally organized by the board of directors meetings. However, only some of them have workers on the board. In the co-ops, the members have a formal say. Based on our data, we were not able to make statements about informal aspects of participation in practice. These might, of course, reduce participation possibilities even in co-ops. Finally, the organizations in our sample all have social and ecological missions. 11 organizations in our sample also report on various aspects of the environment and social impact. These are generally selected numbers regarding core aspects of their mission. We could not find evidence for more integrated approaches to monitoring social and environmental impact. In sum, we find tentative general support for the argument, mainly based on the regional scope, as well as the legal structure of the organizations. Moreover, the relatively small size of the organizations in principle facilitates a democratic decision-making process. Second argument, the shift to the service economy requires workers having a say. The circular economy strategies offer various twists to this idea. The strategies putting an emphasis on the reuse and extension of product life tend to draw on locally available products and resources, such as textiles or plastic, in often labor-intensive processes. They require a capacity to identify a local product and resource availabilities creatively for circular strategies of donation, refurbishing, etc. They also respond to the problematic consequences of industrial production, that is primarily via the recycling and revalorization of the waste produced elsewhere, as well as the proposal of alternative ways of producing, eco-design, sharing models, second-hand and repair offers, recuperation of materials, and so forth. Eco-design, such as design and fabrication of cloth from recycled materials, points to the importance of skill and craft in support of the having a say argument. Examples in our sample are La Patente, Ecofab, La Fabrique, and Dr. Grenil. Yet other organizations in our sample turn to the circumstances of abundance. The focus is on sharing things people already have or on making them available for low-income groups. The focus moves from the worker to the consumer in the collaborative economy. Recycling and restoring materials prima facie are compatible with top-down management in hierarchical industrial organization. However, it is noteworthy that 50% in our sample are work integration organizations with a mandate to provide work opportunities for people facing difficulties entering the labor market. Thus, the social economy organizations indicate a niche for a more inclusive economy, even in industrial capitalism. Moreover, for locally available diverse materials of often small volumes, the fit with small labor-intensive organizations suggests limits to hierarchical top-down organization. Thus, the sample suggests a differentiated response to this second argument. First, a small subset of the sample fully embodies the service shift as one requiring workers having a say. Second, associated with this shift to the service economy, we find a focus on sharing in the collaborative economy, which arguably moves beyond the focus on workers and thus challenges circular economy to move beyond, at least in the market, and at the margin, beyond its market exchange model to also include creativity and the gift economy. Third, another subset of our sample works, repairs, restores, recycles in the shadow of industrial society. The primary issue here appears not to be having a say, but having work in the first place. Prior to the right of having a say at work is the real opportunity of having work. This is where the work insertion comes in, but thereby evidently complicates the having a say argument. The key ambivalence is the tension between making individuals employable as human capital for the economy and the recognition of human beings as both vulnerable and autonomous. The latter is arguably in evidence via the decent pay and accountability requirements of the government, which supports the idea of workers as citizens with rights. The former could be seen in evidence in the only limited temporal support for vulnerable people. So much about for the first two arguments. We continue in the text with the third and the fourth argument. Due to time constraints, I just want to come here to our conclusions. Basically, what we find based on our exploratory study is that these instrumental arguments for workplace democracy and for the protection of the environment and sustainability are generally supported, and that the legal and social context is especially important for that. Moreover, we found it interesting that social economy highlights the social phase of circular economy, that is, the work insertion is not only who has a say, but who is included in the first place, and all the relational questions that come with that of how we interact at work. Finally, at the margin, some evidence for circular economy beyond market exchange, circular society, and communal modes of provision and collaboration were at least marginally also present. We have all this in a bigger version as a chapter. If you would like to have it, please get in touch. And otherwise, looking forward to seeing you at the conference. Bye.